I thought I was losing my mind until I found the love notes tucked inside my cookbooks. The discovery wasn't a sudden, dramatic event. It was a slow, dawning horror that crept over me as one by one, those little squares of cream-colored paper fluttered from the pages of my most familiar books, each one a silent bomb detonating in the sanctity of my own kitchen. My husband David and I had built what I believed was a fortress of love and trust, a sanctuary in our quiet, leafy suburb of Boston. We lived in a cozy Cape Cod-style house, its pale blue siding and white trim a picture of New England charm, a home we'd poured our hearts and savings into renovating during the first 2 blissful years of our marriage. Every scuffed floorboard we'd refinished, every coat of paint we'd carefully applied, felt like a promise for the future. That future had finally arrived in the form of our son, Noah, a 4-month-old miracle after 2 soul-crushing miscarriages that had left us hollowed out with grief. Noah was our rainbow, our everything, his gummy smiles and tiny, grasping hands the center of our newly reordered universe. David's best friend since their freshman year of college, Ethan, had been an integral part of our story from the very beginning. He was David's rock, his brother in all but blood. He'd been the best man at our wedding, giving a speech that was both hilarious and deeply touching, reducing half the guests to happy tears. He'd been our most enthusiastic helper during the renovation, spending weekends covered in drywall dust, his easy laughter echoing through the empty rooms. We considered him family. He was a fun, doting uncle to Noah, always arriving with an armful of ridiculous, age-inappropriate toys or a tiny, expensive outfit that Noah would grow out of in a matter of weeks. His presence was a constant, a comfortable, familiar part of our landscape. But the topography of that landscape began to shift subtly in the months following Noah's birth. David, a brilliant and dedicated software engineer, had been tapped to lead a critical new project at his firm. The demands were immense. His days started at 7:30 a.m. and often didn't end until 8 o'clock or 9 p.m., sometimes later. The silence of the large house, punctuated only by Noah's cries and coos, could be deafening. At first, Ethan's increased presence felt like a lifeline. He worked as a freelance graphic designer, a career that afforded him a fluid and unpredictable schedule, and he began to use that flexibility to insert himself into our daily routine. He started appearing like clockwork around 9:30 a.m., just as I'd managed to get Noah down for his first, blessedly long, nap of the day. He would arrive bearing gifts, not just any coffee, but a perfectly crafted latte from the artisanal roaster across town, and a bag of still warm, everything bagels from the Jewish bakery I loved but never had the energy to visit. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up," he'd say with that charming, lopsided smile of his. He'd shoo me away, telling me to take a nap, that he'd keep an eye on the baby, monitor. In my state of sleep-deprived, new mother exhaustion, I was profoundly grateful. He'd load the dishwasher, take out the overflowing trash, or fold a basket of tiny laundry without being asked. He was like a domestic fairy godmother, and I felt guilty for my growing unease. The gratitude, however, slowly began to curdle into a persistent, low-grade anxiety that hummed under my skin. The visits began to feel less like spontaneous act of kindness and more like a rigid, non-negotiable routine, an expectation. He would stay for hours, often lingering well into the early afternoon, long after Noah had woken and been fed and changed again. We would sit and he would talk. He'd tell me about his difficult clients, his frustratingly stagnant dating life, his feeling of being adrift and unmoored while David and I seemed to have it all figured out. Then the comments started, subtle at first, like a single drop of ink in clear water. "You and David. You just have it all," he'd muse, his gaze sweeping across our lovingly furnished living room. "The perfect house. The perfect little family. It's the dream, you know? The one everyone sells you but nobody actually gets." Then his eyes, a warm hazel that once seemed friendly, would land on me with an unsettling intensity. You're just so natural at this, Anna. Motherhood looks good on you. It's like you were born for it. David is a phenomenally lucky man. The compliments, which should have felt supportive and kind, started to feel heavy, loaded with a meaning I couldn't quite decipher. They were too personal, too focused. He began to find small, seemingly innocent reasons to bridge the physical distance between us. A hand placed firmly on my shoulder as he passed behind my chair to look out the window. A deliberate, lingering brush of his fingers against mine when he handed me a warm mug of coffee. He'd stand just a little too close when we both peered down at Noah sleeping in my arms, his shoulder pressing against mine, his breath disturbingly close to my ear. I developed a habit of subtle evasion, shifting away, turning my body, creating a few precious inches of space, but he was like a tide, always flowing back to close the gap. I gathered my courage and tried to broach the subject with David one night after a particularly long and claustrophobic visit from Ethan. We were in our bathroom, brushing our teeth, the mundane routine a stark contrast to the turmoil in my head. Ethan was here for almost 5 hours today. I mentioned trying to keep my tone light, casual. David just grinned around his toothbrush, his reflection in the mirror looking tired but content. That's Ethan for you. He's a saint, I'm telling you. I don't know what we'd do without him, especially with me being so slammed at work. He's keeping you from going stir-crazy, right? Keeping you sane. He's just here a lot, I said, carefully wiping my mouth. And he says things that are a little intense sometimes. Intense how? David asked, but his attention was already divided, his eyes flicking toward his phone on the counter, no doubt checking for late-night work emails. Like, how he wishes he had our life. How incredibly lucky you are. He told me I looked beautiful today, even with a big spot of Noah's spit up on my shoulder. David let out a short, dismissive laugh. That's just him being nice, Anna. He's my best friend. He loves you. He adores Noah. He's probably just a bit lonely, you know? His last serious relationship with Clara ended over a year ago, and that really did a number on him. I felt a familiar frustration bubble up inside me. I was being dismissed. My concerns were being pathologized, explained away by Ethan's loneliness or my own fatigue. I tried again more insistently. It's different when you're not here, David. When it's just the three of us, me, Noah, and Ethan, it's like he's a different person, more focused. On me, it doesn't feel like he's here to see his nephew. It feels like he's here to see me. David finally looked up from his phone, his expression shifting to one of mild concern mixed with a hint of condescension. Babe, you're exhausted. You're running on 3 hours of broken sleep. New mom brain is a real thing. You're probably just reading into things, reading a tone that isn't there. Ethan would never, ever overstep. He's the most loyal guy I know. He'd take a bullet for me, for us. The incident that truly set my teeth on edge, that transformed my unease into genuine alarm, happened about a week later. I was nestled on the couch, nursing Noah in the soft late afternoon light. Ethan was sitting in the armchair opposite me. Not reading, not on his phone, just watching us with a soft, unnerving smile. You two look like a painting, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. So peaceful, so perfect, a Madonna and child. The comparison felt archaic, strangely intimate. Then he stood up, pulled his smartphone from his pocket, and before I could even form a protest, the camera's shutter sound clicked in the quiet room. Ethan, don't, I said, my body reacting before my mind, instinctively turning Noah's facing toward my chest, shielding him from view. Why not? He asked, his tone deceptively light, but his eyes held a serious, possessive gleam. It's a beautiful moment. I want to remember this. Just like this. I'd rather you not take pictures of me without asking, I said, my voice coming out firmer, colder than I had intended. It's not okay. He looked genuinely wounded, immediately shoving the phone back into his jeans pocket, as if it had burned him. Sorry, I apologize. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I see something beautiful, and I want to capture it, to keep it, for myself. For myself. Those two words echoed in my head long after he'd made a stiff, awkward exit. That wasn't a comment for David, or for the family photo album. That was a statement of personal possession, a keepsake, for him. The final, terrifying confirmation came with the notes. It was a Tuesday morning. Noah was having a rare, independent nap at his crib, and I decided to lose myself in the comforting, methodical process of making banana bread. I was looking for my old, reliable recipe, pulling my battered, flour-dusted copy of The Joy of Cooking from its shelf. As I opened it, a small, neatly folded square of high-quality, cream-colored paper fluttered out and spun to the floor. I bent down and picked it up, thinking it was an old grocery list or a bookmark I'd forgotten about. I unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, and completely unfamiliar. It wasn't David's messy scrawl. The message was short, but its content was explosive. I watch you sleep sometimes, from the hallway. The moonlight on your face is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. My blood seemed to freeze solid in my veins. A violent shudder racked my body, and I dropped the paper as if it were a live spider. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, panicked drumbeat. This wasn't a vague feeling anymore. This was evidence. With trembling hands, I pulled another book from the shelf, a novel from my book club I hadn't touched in months. I fanned the pages. Another note. Same paper, same handwriting, fluttered into my palm. The sound of your laugh is my favorite song. I try to say things to hear more often. A sob caught in my throat. I felt dizzy, violated. I moved to the kitchen desk, where I kept my personal planner and recipe binders. My fingers trembled so badly I could barely open the rings of the binder. There, tucked between a recipe for chicken soup and my weekly meal plan, was a third note. He doesn't see the light you bring into a room. He's too busy, too distracted. But I do. I always do. I have from the very first day. A frantic, sick energy took over me. I tore through the kitchen, pulling every book on the shelves, rifling through magazines, opening every single cookbook. My search was desperate, disorganized, driven by a rising tide of pure terror. By the time I was done, 7 of those innocuous, terrifying little squares were laid out in a neat, damning row on our farmhouse kitchen table. They were declarations, not a friendly affection or familial love, but a deep, obsessive, and delusional infatuation. He had been in my home, in my most intimate space, while I was vulnerable and alone, hiding these secret messages for me to find. Or perhaps, even more chillingly, just for him to know they were there, nestled close to my things, permeated my life with his silent presence. I felt violently ill. The sanctuary in my home had been profaned. The trust one had placed in a man I considered a brother was shattered into a million sharp, cutting pieces. I was terrified, not just of the words, but of the mind that conceived them and the audacity it took to plant them in my territory. When David finally came home that night, well, after 9 p.m., I was a complete wreck. I had not moved from the kitchen table for hours. The notes were spread out before me like a prosecutor's evidence, my hands still shaking uncontrollably. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't checked on Noah, relying entirely on the baby monitor, my ears straining for any sound that wasn't the frantic pounding of my own heart. I didn't give David a chance to take off his coat or his shoes. We need to talk. Now! My voice was a raw, strained thing I barely recognized. He saw my pale, tear-streaked face, saw the array of papers on the table, and his easy, tired smile vanished, replaced by immediate alarm. "Anna, My God, what's going on? What is all this? Is it Noah? Is he okay? It's not Noah. I choked out. It's Ethan. I made him sit down. I told him everything, leaving nothing out. I started from the beginning, from the prolonged daily visits that coincided precisely with his absences, to the intense, overly personal compliments that made my skin crawl, to the inappropriate physical proximity, to the creepy incident with the photograph, and finally, the devastating discovery of the notes. I showed him each one, making him read them aloud. I watched his face cycle through confusion, then disbelief, then a dawning, sickened horror that seemed to age him 10 years in as many minutes. He picked up the first note I had found, the one about watching me sleep. His hand was trembling. This is Ethan's handwriting, he said, his voice hollow and flat. I'd know anywhere. We shared an apartment for 5 years. I've seen 1,000,000 of his design sketches. This is his hand. He sank back into the chair as if all the strength had left his body, running his hands over his face, pressing his palms into his eyes as if to push the image of the words away. My God, he whispered, the words muffled. I thought you were just tired. I thought the stress was getting to you, that you were imagining a threat that wasn't there. He looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with a pain, profound shame. Anna, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I should have listened to you. I failed you. The relief that washed over me was so powerful. It was almost debilitating. It felt like a physical weight being lifted from my chest, allowing me to take my first full, deep breath in weeks. He believed me. He finally, truly saw it. Without another word, David stood up, his movement stiff with controlled fury. He pulled his phone from his pocket and called Ethan. He put it on speakerphone and placed it in the center of the table, between the damning notes. The ringtone seemed obscenely loud in the tense silence of the kitchen. Ethan answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful. Hey, man, what's up? Late night at the office. David's voice was dangerously calm, a thin veneer over a boiling rage. Ethan, I need you to explain the notes you've been leaving in my wife's books. There was a long, dead silence on the other end of the line. It was so complete, I thought for a moment the call had dropped. Then a shaky, tentative, what notes? David, I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't. David snarled, the calm shattering instantly. Don't you dare lie to me. Not now. I have them right here in front of me. 7 of them. In your handwriting. What the hell is wrong with you? What were you thinking? The facade crumbled. Ethan started to cry. But it wasn't a sound of remorse or shame. It was a raw, self-pitying wail. You don't understand, David. You have everything. You have the career. You have the house. You have her. You have Noah. You have the whole perfect life I was supposed to have. I love her. I've always loved her. Since the day you first introduced us at that stupid football watch party. I knew then. I felt the banana bread I hadn't even eaten rise sourly in my throat. David's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the table. You stay away from my family, David said, his voice low and trembled with a rage I had never heard before. You are never to set foot in this house again. You are never to contact Anna, ever. Not a text, not an email, not a carrier pigeon. If you come near her, if you so much as look at her from across the street, I will ruin you. Do you understand me? We are done. You are dead to me. He didn't wait for a response. He ended the call and threw his phone onto the table with such force that it skittered across the surface and knocked one of the cream-colored notes to the floor. For a long, heavy moment, he just stood there, his back to me, his shoulders heaving with ragged breaths. Then he turned, and the anger in his eyes was replaced by a devastating grief and regret. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled me into a crushing, desperate hug. I am so sorry, he whispered into my hair, his voice breaking. I failed you. I failed to protect you in our own home. I made you feel like you were crazy when you were the only one who was sane. I will never forgive myself for that. The fallout from that night was brutal and protracted. David called his parents, who had always adored Ethan, considering him a second son. They were initially horrified, but David's mother, Linda, fell back on a familiar script of excuse-making. He's clearly not well, David. He's mentally ill. He needs help, therapy, support, not to be cut off and abandoned. We can't just throw him away. David was immovable, his resolve forged in the fire of his own guilt and my terror. He was writing love notes to my wife and hiding them in her things while I was at work, he stated, his voice cold and clear over the phone. He was fantasizing about her, watching her sleep, while she was alone and vulnerable with our infant son. There is no illness that excuses that. There is no context that makes it okay. If you defend him, if you so much as imply that this is anything other than what it is, a predatory, disgusting violation, then you are choosing him over the safety and well-being of your daughter-in-law and your grandson. The ultimatum hung in the air, a line drawn in sand. After a tense and emotionally draining few days, his parents, including a reluctant Linda, came around. They arrived at our door with flowers and apologies, their faces etched with shared shame. Ethan, predictably, played the victim to the hilt. He sent a long, rambling, and emotionally manipulative email to David, blaming his actions on profound loneliness and a deep-seated depression he'd been too ashamed to seek help for. He claimed he never meant to scare me, that his feelings for me were pure and overwhelming, and that they had simply overflowed onto the page. He begged for forgiveness, for a chance to explain himself in person. David deleted the email, without sending a single word in reply. The next day, we had a locksmith come to the house. The familiar, comforting click of our old locks was replaced by the solid, definitive thud of new high-security deadbolts. David then invested in a comprehensive, top-of-the-line security system, with cameras at every entrance, motion sensors, and a panic button installed right next to our bed. He negotiated with his company to work from home for 2 weeks, refusing to leave Noah and me alone until he was certain the new systems were seamless, and I felt a semblance of safety returning to the house. He became my fiercest, most hyper-vigilant protector, his previous dismissal replaced by a ferocious commitment to my sense of security. The fear, however, was a tenacious ghost. For months afterwards, I would jump the sound of car doors slamming outside, my heart lurching into my throat, if I saw a vehicle that even remotely resembled Ethan's on our quiet street. I had nightmares where I would find new notes, hidden in places I'd already checked, the handwriting growing more frantic, more demanding. But through it all, David was there. His unwavering belief was my anchor. Our marriage, which had felt so strained and distant under the weight of his work and my unheeded fears, emerged from the crisis fundamentally stronger, its foundation reforged in brutal honesty. He had learned, the hardest way possible, to listen to my instincts, and I had learned to trust that he would ultimately, when faced with the truth, have my back. A year later, the whole incident feels like a bad dream, a dark and frightening chapter in the story of our lives that we survived together. Our home is truly ours again, its sanctity restored, filled with the uncomplicated, joyful noise of a toddler learning to walk and talk. The ghost of Ethan's obsession has been thoroughly banished, replaced by the solid, reassuring presence of a husband who finally saw the truth and chose his family without hesitation. The old cookbooks are gone, donated to a library book sale. I now work from a tablet mounted on the kitchen counter, my recipes digital and clean, with no hidden spaces for secrets to fester. We are safe. We are whole. We are a fortress, once breached, but now stronger and more guarded than ever before. And that, we know with a deep, hard-won certainty, is everything